A Thanksgiving to remember. The day began like any other Thanksgiving in the Smallwood household. Crisp autumn air wafted through the open windows of their cozy home, mingling with the smell of rosemary potatoes roasting in the oven. The house was filled with that warm, cozy buzz that comes when the whole family gathers under one roof. Laughter, chatter, and the clinking of dishes were already setting the stage for a picture-perfect Thanksgiving. Martha Smallwood, the matriarch of the family, was bustling around the kitchen with her apron tied securely around her waist, her gray hair pinned up into a neat bun. She took immense pride in her Thanksgiving feast. Every year, she orchestrated the cooking like a maestro conducting an orchestra. Every detail was meticulously planned, from the perfect golden turkey to the fluffiest mashed potatoes. Her husband, George, sat on the couch, pretending to watch football but really just savoring the smells of the upcoming meal. Occasionally, he would yell something about the game to keep up the charade, but everyone knew better. Football was just a convenient excuse to stay close to the kitchen. Their two children, Ethan and Sophie, were visiting with their spouses and children, filling the house with the delightful chaos that comes with extended family gatherings. Ethan, a schoolteacher, tried to keep his two boys, Max and Lucas, from bouncing off the walls, while Sophie chased after her toddler daughter, Emma, who was determined to get her hands on something breakable. The Smallwood Thanksgiving was always a grand affair, but this year, things were a little different. Martha had decided to go all out, convinced that this would be the year everyone would remember for her flawless execution of the meal. She had been planning for weeks, and nothing, not even the smallest hiccup, was going to ruin her perfectly curated day. Or so she thought. It all started with the turkey. This year, Martha had ordered a massive, 20-pound turkey from the local butcher. "We'll have leftovers for days," she said with a gleam in her eye, imagining sandwiches and soups in the days to come. The turkey had arrived early that morning, and George, who was given the simple task of carrying it in from the car, underestimated its weight. He stood by the front door, legs braced, arms strained, trying to balance the giant bird as he shuffled backward toward the kitchen. The problem was, George had forgotten about the small rug that sat in front of the door, a rug that had been there for years, but which, in his current state of concentration, he failed to see. With one misstep, his foot caught the edge of the rug, and before he knew it, the giant turkey slipped from his grasp. "Watch out!" George yelled, but it was too late. The turkey tumbled to the ground, bouncing once before rolling down the hallway like a giant, meat-filled bowling ball. It collided with the wall at the end of the hall, landing with a thud. Silence fell over the house. Martha rushed in from the kitchen, her eyes wide with horror. "George, what happened?" she cried, her voice rising in panic. I slipped?" George offered weakly, pointing at the offending rug. For a moment, no one said anything. The turkey lay on the floor, looking slightly worse for wear but still intact. Then Ethan burst out laughing. "Dad, you dropped the turkey." George tried to protest, but his sheepish expression betrayed him. "It was heavier than it looked," he said defensively. Sophie, who had been watching from the living room, couldn't hold back her laughter either. "Oh, this is classic. The turkey takes a dive before it even makes it to the oven." Soon, the whole family was in stitches, even Martha, though she tried to hide it behind her dismay. "Oh, for heaven's sake, George," she muttered, though there was a smile creeping across her face. "Well, it's still fine, isn't it?" George asked, inspecting the turkey. Martha sighed. "I suppose so. But you're not getting out of helping me clean it up." As the turkey incident was being sorted, little Lucas, always the curious one, was hanging around the kitchen. He had inherited his mother Sophie's inquisitive nature, which meant he was constantly poking his nose where it didn't belong. While the grown-ups were distracted by the turkey saga, Lucas wandered over to the kitchen counter, where Martha had been preparing the rosemary potatoes. The beautiful, golden brown wedges had been roasted to perfection, and the smell was absolutely heavenly. Lucas, being the impatient 6-year-old that he was, decided it wouldn't hurt to sneak a bite. He reached out, grabbed a potato wedge, and stuffed it in his mouth, only to realize a second too late that it was piping hot. His eyes widened as he tried to swallow it down without making a scene. "What's wrong, Lucas?" Max asked, noticing his brother's odd expression. "MMFPH." Lucas mumbled, trying to chew while fanning his mouth. "Are you okay?" Ethan asked, glancing over. By this point, Lucas had managed to swallow the potato, but the experience had left him breathless. Too hot, he finally gasped, grabbing a glass of water. Ethan and Max burst into laughter as Lucas coughed dramatically. "That'll teach you to steal Grandma's potatoes," Ethan teased. Martha, who had just re-entered the kitchen, narrowed her eyes at Lucas. "Were you sneaking a bite, young man?" Lucas looked up guiltily, his face flushed from the heat of the potato. "Sorry, Grandma." Martha's stern expression softened. "You'll get your share soon enough. But next time, wait for the food to cool down." As the afternoon rolled on, the house grew even more chaotic. Sophie's husband, David, had decided to be helpful and offer to carve the turkey. Unfortunately, he had never actually carved a turkey before. Standing proudly at the head of the table, carving knife in hand, David puffed out his chest. "I've got this," he said with a wink. Martha, still a little hesitant after the morning's turkey disaster, eyed him warily but decided to let him handle it. David plunged the knife into the turkey with a little too much enthusiasm. The bird wobbled precariously on its platter as he hacked at it, trying to slice through the breast. The problem was, instead of neat, even slices, the turkey was quickly turning into a shredded mess. David," Sophie said slowly, watching in horror as chunks of turkey flew across the table. "I think you're supposed to, slice it." David frowned, looking down at the mangled turkey. "I am slicing it." Martha couldn't take it anymore. "David, please, just let me do it," she cried, rushing forward to save what was left of her perfect turkey. David, clearly out of his depth, handed over the knife with a sheepish grin. "Sorry, Martha. I guess turkey carving isn't my forte." The family burst out laughing again, and even Martha had to chuckle as she salvaged the remains of the bird. "Well, at least there's still plenty to go around," she said with a smile. Despite the mishaps, the dropped turkey, the burnt mouth, and the disastrous carving, the meal turned out to be a roaring success. As everyone gathered around the table, passing dishes of rosemary potatoes, stuffing, and cranberry sauce, the mood was light and joyful. Ethan regaled the family with stories from his classroom, making everyone laugh with his impersonations of his students' antics. Sophie, always the jokester, entertained the table with stories of Emma's latest escapades, including how the toddler had recently learned to flush the toilet over and over again. George, in his usual dry humor, joked about the turkey bowling incident, much to the delight of his grandsons. By the time dessert was served, Martha's famous pumpkin pie, the entire family was in high spirits. The laughter and teasing from earlier had given way to that warm, cozy feeling of togetherness that only a holiday like Thanksgiving can bring. As they sat around the table, bellies full and hearts light, George raised his glass of cider. "To family," he said, his eyes twinkling. "And to a Thanksgiving none of us will ever forget." Everyone raised their glasses and echoed his toast, grinning from ear to ear. Martha, who had been silently watching her family enjoy the meal she had worked so hard to prepare, smiled to herself. Despite the chaos, despite the turkey's tumble and the imperfect carving, this was exactly what she had hoped for. A day filled with laughter, love, and plenty of stories to tell for years to come. As the evening wound down, George leaned over to Martha, his voice low. I think this might have been our best Thanksgiving yet." Martha nodded, her heart full. "I think you're right, George. I think you're right." And so, the Smallwood family's Thanksgiving became a legend in its own right. Every year after that, whenever the holiday rolled around, someone would inevitably bring up the Great Turkey Tumble, and they would all laugh, remembering the day when the turkey tried to make a break for it. Lucas burned his mouth, and David butchered the carving. But no matter how much they laughed, they always ended the story the same way, with smiles on their faces and the comforting knowledge that no matter what, Thanksgiving was about family, imperfections, and all.